So
this is the third meeting of the Committee on Members' Interests. We've got a quorum already, so may I now call the meeting to order. Agenda item number 1, confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of January have already been issued to members, and the clerk hasn't received any proposals for amendments. So can we confirm the minutes, please? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 2, outcome of consultation with members on whether an independent person should be appointed as a commissioner to receive and investigate complaints against members. As members may recall, there was a discussion in this committee in the last term, and it was decided that a decision would be made by this term of LegCo. And in fact, we've recently consulted our members, and they have already responded. I think the clerk can report the outcome of the consultation with members to us. Yes, thank you, Chairman. In the light of the decision made by the committee on the 28th of January, on the 28th of February, we issued a questionnaire to members seeking their views on the proposal. And may I refer members to paragraph 5? A total of 69 members, all members except the President, responded to the questionnaire. About 1/3 of the members agreed that an independent person should be appointed as a commissioner. And among them, 9 members felt that the appointment should require the passage of a motion in the Council by a 4/5 majority of all members of the Council, and 1 member felt that such a motion should require the passage by a 4/5 majority of the members present. And 1 member felt that CMR should propose a mechanism for the appointment of the Commissioner and consult members again. And 1 member felt that the Commissioner should be appointed only when there was a case that required to be followed up. And then 34 members, or about 50%, disagreed to the proposal, and among them 1 member said that he was not supportive of any proposed change before there was a clear mechanism for appointing the commissioner. And 12 members, or about 1/6 of the total number of members responding, did not express any views on the matter. And so the outcome is clear. We have 34 members, or 49.3% of the members, who do not agree to the idea of appointing a commissioner to receive and investigate complaints against members. So the way forward is to invite members to make a decision. So I believe that we will not be appointing a commissioner. Is that right? Because in fact, a majority of the members do not support the idea. In fact, I've asked members who said they had no views, and they said that in fact they objected to the idea, but they didn't know why. They indicated that they had no views on the matter. Yes, Chairman. 1 member, or rather, he was talking about the appointment mechanism. May I refer to paragraph 43 of the minutes? It is said that it would be very difficult for the commissioner to carry out his work in the absence of a code of conduct. So it's useless to have a commissioner when we don't have a formal code of conduct for members. Yes, we also said last time that the work of the commissioner would be difficult in the absence of a formal code of conduct for members. And at the moment, there is no consensus among members concerning the introduction of a code of conduct. All right, so I think our decision will be recorded in the minutes. So this is our decision. We will not pursue the idea further. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And that's item 3. Under Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, in the Council or in any committee or subcommittee, a member shall not move any motion or amendment relating to a matter in which he has a pecuniary interest, whether direct or indirect, or speak on any such matter, except where he discloses the nature of that interest. And in the Bills Committee on the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2012, many members have to, before they speak, declare their interests. And it was felt that the proceedings of the Bills Committee was unduly impeded. And so this committee has been asked to come to a view on this issue. In other words, how can we help members better comply with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure? So the Secretariat has prepared paper CMI 50 for us. And can I invite the clerk to take us through the paper, and then we can have a discussion among ourselves. Yes, Chairman, thank you. In para 3, we see that members of the Bills Committee on Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2012 have sought clarification of Rule 83A in respect of the following. A. Whether a member is required to disclose a pecuniary interest which is in common with the rest or a sector of the population in Hong Kong. Most of the members are of the view that it may not be necessary to for them to declare their property, because most people do own property or may wish to purchase property. And then B, whether a member is required to disclose the same pecuniary interest at each and every meeting of the Bills Committee. The CMI of the 4th LegCo conducted a review on the requirement for the registration and disclosure of members' interests. And CMI noted that there was a lack of a definition of direct and indirect pecuniary interest in Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. So it was entirely a matter for members to judge and decide. And there aren't any guidelines as to when the disclosure of the interest should be made. For example, if a member has declared the interest at the first meeting of a committee, then does he need to do it again at subsequent meetings of the committee? And then the CMI looked at whether Rule 83A should be expanded to require that a member should disclose interest if he or she has a reasonable expectation of pecuniary interest in a matter under consideration by a committee of the Council. Now, at the moment, it's for individual members to judge whether they have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the matter under consideration. And the test is to allow other people to judge if his views on the matter have been influenced by his interest. Then the timing of the disclosure. According to para 7 and para 8, CMI is of the view that in order to enable others to judge if the views of a member on a matter have been influenced by his interest, then the disclosure should be made at the beginning of the speech on the matter. And it would be prudent if the member can, each time before he speaks on the matter, discloses the interest. But then the proceedings of the meeting may be unduly impeded if at the same meeting the member has to declare the interest each time before he speaks on the matter. And the rules of procedure are silent on whether there is a need to disclose the interest or to at every meeting when there is a series of meetings. In the UK, again, the test is whether others would think that the interest of the member would affect his views on the matter. But then in the UK, they have very detailed guidelines. And may I refer you to para 10? Members are required to declare relevant interests on the order paper when submitting a written notice initiating a proceeding, such as questions and so on and so forth. And whenever such an interest has been declared, the symbol R is printed on the order paper after the name of the member concerned, denoting that the member has declared a relevant interest. And we don't have such a requirement in Hong Kong. And then para 11 informs members that in a debate in the UK House of Commons, a member should declare an interest briefly, usually at the beginning of his or her speech. And in public bills committees, which are like the bills committees in this LegCo, members are required to declare relevant interest at the first meeting of the committee or on the first occasion on which they address the committee. And it is not necessary for a declaration to be repeated at subsequent meetings except when the member speaks on an amendment to which the interest is particularly relevant. So research was done by the CMI in the last term. We've looked at recently the relevant requirements of the House of Commons of the Parliament of Canada and the House of Representatives of the Parliament of Australia. In 1988, oral declaration of interest was no longer required in the Australian legislature. And in the House of Commons of Canada, disclosure of interest can be made either verbally or in writing. But then, even if a disclosure is made orally, the member has to afterwards make the disclosure in writing to the clerk of the House. And then, concerning private interest in the House of Commons of Canada, that excludes matters which are of general application or matters that affect members or others as part of a broad class of the public. And I'm now on para 15. At the meeting on the 26th of November last year, CMI noted the views of the CMI of the last term on the matter, and it was decided that an information paper would be issued to all members to assist them in understanding the requirements. And here we are seeking members' advice on 3 matters.
Number 1, whether the practice of disclosing pecuniary interest on a matter before a member first speaks on the matter at the meeting of the Council or its committees should be formalized. And whether pecuniary interest to be disclosed under Rule 83A of the ROP should exclude those interests which are in common with the rest or a sector of the population, and whether the practice of the UK House of Commons to declare relevant interest when initiating proceeding should be examined further with a view to applying it to the LegCo Hong Kong. Okay, now coming back to the Hong Kong situation, now such practice can have a monitoring effect and will also protect individual members to make sure that there is no conflict of interest, and in any case we are open to public scrutiny. So now, as of today, in the efficient operation of our meetings is obviously important. It is not our aim to reduce public scrutiny. Now, we are rather looking at the technical side as to how this can best be done. And that's why our attention is drawn to paragraph 17 as to how best to proceed. So first of all, I'd like to listen to your views before we look into the various suggestions outlined in paragraph 17. Mr. Lam. Now, Chairman, now whether in our meetings or in society in general, we often see that different people have different standards. And obviously, if personal interest is involved, he or she may have a different yardstick. Now, for LegCo members, now it is the case that every year we have to fill out a rather detailed form declaring our own interests in companies and so on. Now, so if during meetings and committees and every time we are called upon to declare such interests, members will find that this is too repetitive. Now, if members somehow forget to declare their interests and then accused of breaking the rules, that will make it very difficult for the members concerned. I don't believe that those members deliberately want to hide any information, because if that was the motive, he or she would have omitted those relevant information when filling out the forms every year. Now, the requirement now is to declare interest before you speak. So technically, you will be against the law if you only declare afterwards. So am I right? I'm just checking this with the legal advisor. So technically, I would be found acting against the rules and regulations. So these are things we want to look at. So if you have a meeting that runs for, let's say, 4 years, say deliberating the company ordinance, if every time you have attend a meeting and every time before you speak you have to declare your interest, then that is going to take a very long time. Now, I believe that once you have declared your interest once, then that should be good enough for the remaining meetings. Now, because these problems did arise in the past. So I'd like to hear the views of the legal advice Now, if you declare interest before you speak, that would be okay. But what if you do it afterwards? Will that create a problem? Legal advisor. Now, 83A, if the situation described above, then you will actually be violating the conditions of 83A. Yes, you will be, found, foul of the law, as it were. So, what would happen afterwards? Now, Chair, that is really the first step or the first stage. Now, as to what will follow will depend on the actual situation. Now, the exact wording was looked at by the previous committee members, and they are counting on the present committee to follow the same principle and procedures without unnecessarily impeding the progress of the meetings. And Mr. Lam, anything from you? Mr. Chairman, I am not ruling out that there might be some members trying to catch us when we are, inadvertently breaking the law. So if you only announce your interest after your speech, now what would happen after that? Now, if you dig back the records in the past years, I believe there must have been many members who had inadvertently committed this mistake. So if members were to lodge complaint, then you have a meeting or you handle it through your chairman's discretion. Now, this is going to create an endless list of problems. So this is something we need to look at. Now, the public expects the highest standard from LegCo members. So that is a very valid point, I believe. So we have to make improvements, obviously, but at the same time, not to reduce any such public scrutiny. But of course, as the legal advisor said, now, if you only declare interest afterwards, then technically, again, you have committed an offense. Now, this creates a very practical problem. We want the public to be assured that in our deliberation, we must be seen to be not having any conflict of interest. So if you only declare interest afterwards, now, my view, of course, is that the scrutiny is still there. It has not been reduced. So the law must be made clearer on this. Otherwise, I think we are really overdoing it. Our aim is to allow the public to scrutinize us. And of course, if you have a situation where you should declare interest in the meeting, but you fail to do so throughout the whole meeting, then that's a different story. Now, thank you, Chair. I would like to go back to Mr. Lam's point. Now, every year we have to declare interest. Now, if I have already done that, I have already declared my pecuniary interest. It's only that I have forgotten to declare the interest before I speak. So, I mean, technically, legally, I have already declared interest at the beginning of the year. So, can this be construed in this manner, that I have already made a declaration? Now, based on the last committee's reports, now, the written submission cannot replace the requirements under 83A. Mr. Fong. Now, allow me to maybe make a suggestion as to whether enough has been done. Now, paragraph 8, or the present arrangement, I think is pretty satisfactory. We should be stringent, but at the same time, we want our meetings to be efficient. So, an oral disclosure before each and every meeting is practicable. But we want to protect our members. They have done written submissions already, but administratively, he or she might have forgotten to do this. Now, maybe there should be a piece of paper listing the 5 members or 10 members declaration, and every time before the meeting, the chairman can remind that meeting or those speeches. This can be done by the chairman or the members concerned, so that this acts as a kind of protection and shows the public that we are fully accountable. Now, why the oral declaration is important, I feel, is that there may be members of the public attending the meeting or listening to our records. The oral report during that meeting is to facilitate the members of the public listening to the recording or attending the meeting in person, to allow them to know that declarations have been made and what those declarations are. So I'm just suggesting that that piece of paper be read out as a matter of routine, and the administrative cost is relatively low. Okay, now the last term members have discussed that the written submission cannot replace the oral reports. If that's the case, what is the purpose of having that written submission in the first place? Because we want the public to know whether there's any conflict of interest. But if that one is useless, then why do it? Now, am I right in understanding this? Now, let me give an example. Now, if I remember this, I would have declared this again.
Now, say, for example, I always say that Hong Kong needs a third runway. And the group I serve has investment in the airport freight terminal. So does it mean that every time I talk about the third runway, I have to declare my interest? And this is not my personal interest. We're talking about the overall interest of Hong Kong. So I think the situation is not clear. The members present are not members of the CMI in the last term. Only the Deputy Chairman, Ms. Emily Lau, was a member of the CMI in the last term. So perhaps our legal advisor can give us some advice. I think the written declaration is of course very important. And here we're talking about declaring an interest before a member speaks to enable members of the public to judge if the member's views on the matter have been influenced by his interests. But then he has already done the written declaration. As Mr. Yik has pointed out, when a member assumes office, he has to make a declaration of his interests, his affiliations, and so on and so forth. So who can enlighten us on this matter? Salam. Now, I think before the legal advisor gives us a reply, I would like to ask a question. There are some direct pecuniary interests and there are some indirect pecuniary interest. What is meant by a direct pecuniary interest? Now, say for example, an accountancy firm may serve many companies. And the same happens to law firms. And what if among his clients there are some who have pecuniary interests or dealings with the matter being discussed? So how far should we go? Now, if you really go too far, then you'll say that's a breach of the rule. You'll say that it's a pecuniary interest. And you know, in a big consortium, there may be many companies under it, and Mr. Yik may not know how many such companies there are, what they are doing. But then if, say, Mr. Yik is a director of the parent company, then does it mean that he has to be held responsible for any pecuniary interests in relation to the matter being discussed? Who can give an answer? Legal advisor, please. Yes, Chairman. In 1992, the Hong Kong Legislative Council studied their practice in the UK Parliament and came up with a system of registration of interest and declaration of interest and disclosure of interest. At the beginning of a term of a member, the term may be for 3 years or 4 years, there is a need for the member to register his interests. And the requirements are different from the requirement to disclose verbally his pecuniary interest at the council meeting or a committee meeting. Now, concerning registration of interest, this is about the personal circumstances of the member. It has nothing to do with an item on the agenda, and the rules of procedure outlines 8 broad categories of interest to be registered by members. And also, LegCo members are public officers. They have to deal with a lot of public matters. So how can there be a suitable balance between his privacy rights and his public duties? Because we do not want to provide any disincentive for people to take part in public office. In the last term, the CMI made some recommendations in its report, and the SG has reminded me that some guidelines have been issued to members. And you can see in this folder that in the April 2004 version of the guidelines on registration of interest by members, page 2, item 3, it clearly states that concerning registration of personal interests, you can see that the Rules of Procedure 83A is an additional requirement. And then members mentioned some particular problems. I think we have to look at these on a case-by-case basis. Let's say for a member may have business dealings with many clients, and this is dealt with under Rules of Procedure Rule 83 bracket 5 bracket C. So in some cases the member needs to make a disclosure. In some cases this is not necessary. But then Rule 83A is about direct or indirect pecuniary interest on the part of a member in relation to a matter being discussed in the council meeting or a committee meeting. Now, having an interest and having a conflict of interest are two different matters. Now, concerning what is a direct pecuniary interest, what is an indirect pecuniary interest, the CMI's report did deal with this issue. So we're talking about pecuniary interest not in common with the rest of the population of Hong Kong or a sector thereof. And when we talk about a member is an accountant, who is a lawyer, I think each case has to be looked at on its individual merit. And I don't think we can really apply the same formula to all cases. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Now, I think I feel rather frightened. And the legal advisor says this may not be necessary, this may not be the case, so there is a lack of certainty. But what if I do something and the legal advisor may tell me this may be right or this may not be problematic? Now, you're either a director or not a director of a company. Now, say, for example, Mr. Yik, your group. You know, there are many companies and subsidiaries under the group. So either you say, I should do this or I need not do this. Please do not tell me that, in fact, I have told you that there may not be a problem or there will be a problem. I think we need to have an in-depth discussion into specific situations. So we were talking about the relationship between Rule 83A and the registration of interest. And then the scope of disclosure of interest. What is meant by a complete disclosure? Now, say, for example, I may work for a group, and that group may own a lot of companies and subsidiaries. So, say, if I declare my interest, say I work for a particular group, does it mean that I need not declare my connections with all the subsidiaries and companies? And then, in fact, some members simply do not know how many companies the group owns. And as a result, some members may choose to err on the safe side. They may disclose all the minute details just to err on the safe side. And I think we have to give clear guidelines to members so that they will not be breaching the rules inadvertently. Of course, we're not saying that we should relax the standards by which we monitor the performance of members, but at the same time, we have to make sure that the procedures to be observed are reasonable and feasible. I think we haven't really resolved the case mentioned by Mr. Yik just now. Mr. Dennis Kwok, I do not agree with Mr. Lam that the legal advisor didn't really give members a clear picture. Now, I think as a electoral member, he or she has to come to his or her own judgment. In other words, say for example, when we're discussing railways and I am an engineer and my company is involved or maybe involved in the works, and I have to be very, very careful because as a electoral member, the public do have some expectations concerning my judgment. And so it's incumbent upon the member to exercise his judgment and do things that are acceptable to members of the public. If we have to have guidelines which are so clear that members can tell black from white, that's not easy. And members have to exercise their judgment, and whether the judgment is right or wrong, or, the member has to bear the political consequences. But then we cannot rely on the guidelines to help us decide what to do and what not to do. So ultimately, members have to exercise their judgment. Is that right? Mr. Yik. Yes, Chairman. I agree that members of the public do have rising expectations concerning electoral members. Now, say if I serve if I'm a full-time electoral member, that would be easy and simpler. But what if I work for a law firm or an accountancy firm? Now, law firm and accountancy firm can have many clients, and so there are a lot of technical difficulties. Now, say for example, my group may own a subsidiary which operates a TV service. So is it that I need to declare interest with regard to TV licensing matters? And maybe I don't know that that company within my group is involved in the TV licensing exercise. So it's very difficult to really make the a complete disclosure. Does it mean that I have to say I work for a particular group and this group is involved in the following areas of business, and then I enumerate all or I list all the areas of business that the group is involved in? Legal advisor. Mr. Dennis Kwok said that ultimately members had to exercise their own judgment. I want to confirm that in fact the CMI has said that in fact it's for members to come to their judgment, and I think it's fair that members who know their personal circumstances best should come to their own judgment as to what course of action to take. But I understand that members do have some difficulties. At times they may have some concerns. And in fact, the CMI of the last term had detailed discussion on this issue. And I think members can refer to para 5. 83A does create difficulties for members who do not have any particular motives.
Now, for this term's members, if you look at paragraph 3, based on the Bills Committee on Stamp Duty Amendment Bill, they have raised very concrete points. Now, on the setting up of the Bills Committee on Stamp Duty, now, they have met a lot of times since 1992. The requirement was there, but no problems was ever spotted. So it is really a good example. Now, there were no problems. Oh, wait. Now, the problems raised by the two members were there all the time. Now, if memory serves, this is the first time the issue was brought to the House Committee formally, and the House Committee asked this committee to focus our attention on this particular issue. So this is not just to look at whether the wording is correct, but if you look at paragraph 17, if you feel that more elaboration is needed, then that would be the next round of work, and that will help us make some progress. Now, let me just add, Mr. Chairman, this work is going to take time. I understand the difficulties. Now, how are we going to proceed when the rules are not yet amended? So this is something for members to think about. Now, Chairman, now for the BST committee, now every member has to declare interest, and it takes a lot of time. You have to say that I have property, or my company has one property. So it's not whether the company has property. I'd like to protect the professionals. There are accounting firms and law firms helping people to do stamp duty and produce contracts and so on. And if they do not declare, then these would have committed offenses. So this direct or indirect pecuniary interest does present a problem for us. Now, we mustn't worry about which political party we belong to. Now, we should look at the whole thing generally, because these problems are real. If you're talking about properties, then I would just declare whether I have properties. But the other implications can be far and wide. So while we are discussing this, we should look at what might happen. Now, on the special stamp duty, my observation is that it is very possible that individual members might err on the side of caution, and according to 83A, they really need not disclose those points. Now, obviously, I don't want to name names or how the particular chairman handled the situation, but I think one important point comes out of this. Some members want to make clear what and when to declare interest. Now, of course, if there are precedents, then that would be the best way to follow. And we can offer our best judgment but there is no guarantee that this will not give rise to further complaints. Now, and let's say if there are people complaining, you can discuss how to handle such complaints. This is within your terms of reference. So maybe this is something for members of this committee to think about. The Secretary. Now let me just add that we can look at this more pragmatically. Now, 17b, paragraph 17b, whether pecuniary interest to be disclosed under Rule 83A of the ROP should exclude those interests which are in common with the rest or a sector of the population. Now allow me to focus on this issue now, because when talking about the special stamp duty, those having property may sell, and those who do not have properties may buy. So everyone can be, or everyone is affected. Now, but for 83A, now if you do not mention your pecuniary interest, you are not allowed to speak. Now, but different from 84, 84, the first paragraph, if you have the rules of the procedure as to when you should absent yourself from the meeting. Now, if the interests are in common with the rest or a sector of the population, but not included in 83A. So one pragmatic approach is to maybe add to this. So this particular paper would like to draw members' attention and concern to this issue. So the addition of these elements would have solved the problem. So it can be as simple as that. Now I agree with the Secretary that 17B is important, because this is applying to a lot of people. I heard from the legal advisor that the written submission is different from this. Now, but if I have declared something in writing, now of course I want to fulfill 17A whenever possible. But what if, now let's assume that on one occasion I wanted to respond, I raised my hand to speak, but I forgot to declare. But in the written submission, I have already made such submissions. So this will not be a deliberate hiding of facts. Now, will this be handled as a matter of discretion? So this can be qualified in this way. So can anyone answer the question? Now, Chairman, now there had been similar cases in the past. The last term, we received a complaint that a certain member did not disclose his interest or her interest, that he or she was a director, and the committee involved pointed out that he did divulge the information in another meeting. So in the past there had been similar cases where, now I'm talking about the written submission, and an entry was forgotten for LegCo, but the entry was made for the district council, because if he or she was doing it deliberately, he would have done so for all the meetings. Now, of course, he would still be committing an offense, but in the follow-up actions, this particular fact would be taken into account as to whether the act was deliberate. Now, I think that was a very meaningful discussion. If, say, at the beginning we completed a certain form, and then when we speak, we also have to declare interest. So the purpose of the two is not the same. Now, when you are declaring your interest in writing, it cannot replace oral declaration. Now, the Secretariat is drawing our attention to 17A and B. Now, how are we going to follow up on these 2 points? Now, number 1 is, does it have to be declaration beforehand and not afterwards? And if an offense is committed, then our committee has to handle the follow-up work. And number 2, whether pecuniary interest to be disclosed. Some are items that you can predict, but not necessarily so. So how can we do this more effectively? Now, 17B mentions interests which are in common with the rest or a sector of the population. Now, can this observation solve the problem we are talking about? So this may involve further deliberation. Now, I don't think there is a once and for all solution. But then, how are we going to do this? What room for maneuver do we have? Now, how are we going to investigate more deeply into this? Now, we are being asked, or we're being tasked with this item. Now, do we have anything further to add? I think it's something we have to go back and think about it and then discuss again. If in future we receive complaints, how are we going to react to this? And we want members to have a clearer picture, but I'm not optimistic that we can actually do this. Now, Chairman, I'm sorry for being late. Now, what was that committee? That was in paragraph 3, the Bills Committee on Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2012. But what about this particular term? Now, as of today, no committee is asking us for any amendment. It's just that in a recent Bills Committee, members discover that if we were to follow 83A completely, it will affect the progress of meetings. So we are being asked to see how, on the one hand, we can fulfill the requirements of 83A, but then at the same time, not impeding the progress of meetings. please turn it off. Now, one way to proceed is to amend the regulation. And another possibility mentioned is this is up to the individual members to exercise his or her discretion rather than for the Secretariat to do anything. Now, but then we have to handle complaints too when we receive them, so we can produce a stance to make sure that not every complaint is valid.
Now, in the Bills Committee, some members wanted to seek clarification on Rule 83A. Yes, I'm also a member of the Bills Committee, and members declared their interest at the start of the meeting, and some members apologize for having forgotten to declare their interest. Now, when we became legislative members, we had to register all our interests, and then at the meeting of the Bills Committee, we have to also declare our pecuniary interest, and I don't think this is really really too onerous. But of course, I can remember that at the Bills Committee on Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2012, many members need to declare interest. Perhaps we can ask members about their views. It's difficult to really strike the right balance. But if you ask me, I think this is an open society. People are watching us very closely. So in my view, we should err on the safe side. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Chairman, Mr. Kwok said that he did not agree with me. But I think I have a point. Of course, it's for members to exercise their own judgment. But then when the information given to members is not clear, when the information is vague, then the judgment made may be wrong. So how are we going to deal with such situations? Different sectors, different professions may have different views on the same matter. Yes, I understand that ultimately it's for members to exercise their judgment. And but I think considering what I have said, I don't mind whether others agree or disagree. But then I think it's good that we have this discussion. I think problems or possible problems may arise because of the lack of clear guidance, and I think it's good that we can have a discussion on this matter. Now, I think ultimately it's for the members to make their own decisions because members know their own situation best. But then, of course, there are some members who are very careless, and there are members who may sometimes be forgetful. But then, as the Committee on Members' Interests, we should try as far as possible to provide clear guidelines to members to facilitate their compliance with the rules of procedure. But I think we really can't be absolutely clear. It's not like 1 + 1 = 2. It's not that things are either black or white. So perhaps we should look at whether we should review the rule. Now, I think one thing is clear, and that is the public do have rising expectations concerning members, and the public would find it unacceptable if we lower the standards applied to members. But then can members use their collective wisdom to make the rule and the exercise of the rule clearer? And also, after we've laid down the requirements, in future when we receive complaints, we have to handle them in accordance with those requirements. So concerning A and B, I think there is really not too much that can be done. And is it that it's mandatory to make the disclosure before the member speaks? What if the member discloses the interest afterwards because he simply forgot to make the declaration before he spoke? What if he remembers that he needs to make a declaration only after he has spoken? So, whether the disclosure of pecuniary interests must be made before a member first speaks on the matter at a meeting of the council or its committees? Legal advisor, is there any room for maneuver here? I'm talking about the legal principles. No? Chairman? I think the meaning is clear and unambiguous. Then that would mean that this the rule has to be amended. Is it that making the declaration after he has spoken is totally unacceptable? If we think that it's acceptable to have the declaration made after the member has spoken, then I think we should amend the rule. Chairman, this is not a purely legal issue. I think it's for the legislature to decide what the case should be. And once the principle is decided on, then the details can be worked out. And in fact, there can be different scenarios. For example, now say what if a member remembers to declare only after he has spoken, and what if he started speaking for 10 seconds and then suddenly remembered to declare, and what if the member made a very long speech? So what's the problem? What if I remember to declare 10 seconds later? I think what is important is to let the public know that the member speaking has some interest in the matter. So, Chairman, I think these rules and also legal documents reflect the policies and the principles. But what if a member, what if the meeting is very long, the member speaks for a very long time, and what if he remembers to declare his interest only after he has spoken for the third time or the fourth time? Then can that also satisfy the principle that you have in mind? Yes, Chairman. Before I answer the question, I want to clarify a few concepts. Rule 83 is about the registration of personal interests. This is about registration of personal particulars, pecuniary interests, and non-pecuniary interest. 83A is about the disclosure of pecuniary interests, whether direct or indirect. And then Rule 84 is about the requirement for the member concerned to abstain from voting or to withdraw from the meeting. Now, as the legal advisor has pointed out, ultimately it's for members to decide how the registration and declaration of interest should be carried out. Now, in fact, under Rule 83A, in fact, when a member has a pecuniary interest, he should not speak unless he declares the interest first. So if you adopt this perspective, then the disclosure must come before the speech. In fact, the premise is that the member has a pecuniary interest, and in fact he shouldn't be speaking. But then, if he declares his pecuniary interest first, then he can be allowed to speak. And if members think that this is not the requirement, if members think that so long as the member declares the interest that would be acceptable, then that's another matter. Now, say in the UK, there is a symbol R on the order paper after the name of the member concerned, denoting that the member has declared a relevant interest. Now, say Mr. Abraham Sheck, last term he was a director of a company, but then when he spoke at a particular meeting, he did not declare his interest. So should he have been allowed to speak? Or is it that he shouldn't have joined that subcommittee at all? He should have declared. But then he didn't make the declaration at that meeting before he spoke. So is it that you are of the view that he shouldn't have spoken? But then do you know that as a LegCo member, he has his role to play, and so he should be allowed to speak. But of course, he should make a declaration. So we were talking about two different perspectives. Yes, Chairman. Now, if the latter is your attitude, then the wording should be changed, because Rule 83A says that a member shall not move any motion or amendment relating to a matter in which he has a pecuniary interest, whether direct or indirect, or speak on any such matter, except where he discloses the nature of the interest. So this is the way Rule 83A is worded. So what you've suggested, Chairman, is that irrespective of whether a member has a pecuniary interest or not, he should be allowed to speak so long as he, at some point in time, declares the interest. So that's an entirely different principle or approach. But can a clerk tell us which rule was invoked upon to deal with Mr. Abraham Sheck's case? Rule 83A. So is it that he shouldn't have joined that meeting or that subcommittee in the first place? No, it's just that the member shall not speak on any such matter except when he disclosed the nature of the interest. And as far as I understand, the member at that meeting did not make a disclosure. So he should have been allowed, or he should have been allowed to take part in the work of the committee and speak so long as he made a declaration. But then, according to your interpretation of Rule 83A, he should not speak. So he should not be joining the subcommittee or that committee. Is that right? So you're suggesting that in fact he should not speak, he should not join the committee. So what if the member forgets to declare?
Yes, I agree there is a difference. But as far as this committee is concerned, I can now understand members' preferences then we can have certain ways of penning the issue. Now, as long as you have a consensus, now if there's any deviation from our written work, then we can make modifications if needed. So what changes will be made? Secretary. Now, as I was saying, and maybe the LA and the members could supplement. Now, based on what the chairman said, members, whether or not they have pecuniary interest, can speak on any motions or amendments. If he or she has pecuniary interest, then he should declare such interest either in writing or orally. So this is one possibility. Now, if members feel that this is appropriate, then we can do it. Now, this is the case in England, and we can examine the issue more deeply and come back to you. Now, here, what we want to point out is that the present way of writing it is different from what the chairman described just now. Yes. Now, if we follow past discussions, those that we have declared in the past, you have to make a declaration, and the declaration protects you unless you choose not to speak. Now, if we make the amendment, is that after your written declaration, you do not have to do it again orally. Now, as you said, Mr. Chairman, I can understand members' points. The present arrangement is cumbersome. Say on the stamp duty ordinance, people have to make declarations, and if they forget, they have to do it in the middle of their speech, and thus prolonging the length of meetings. Now, I think this is a good thing, because in the initial declaration, you have listed out certain things, but then there may be changes or additions after you have penned your declarations. So if there is any changes in the interim, you can make supplements or changes. So if you were to ask me, Mr. Chairman, I really I'm in favor of this arrangement, but I can understand other members who may find this a bit cumbersome. Right, so there are pros and cons, and we should consult members. I think the Secretary has made it clear. We have present requirements, and you can discuss this more easily if you were to use a concrete example. That is, if you have a conflict of interest, you should not be taking part in that committee. If you choose to attend, then every time you have to declare interest. So if you were to write it in this way, this will produce this particular situation. So you can choose to write it in such a way that, okay, you are allowed to attend, but then every time you have to declare interest. Now, if you were to stop the person from attending the discussion, there may be strong reaction from the related trade or the trade or constituency that he or she represents. So we have to look at these possible ramifications. Now, I believe we should go back to members and consult them. So we can take it from there. Now, let me maybe say a few words. Now, we should sort out the principles first. Now, 83A is based on how we use our public powers. So whenever we make speeches and so on, or make amendments, we want to make sure that public interest is taken care of. So 83A protects members from being seen to be partial. So this is overriding. So we are exercising public power. It must be exercised correctly. Now, most of the discussion today centers on the second, which is secondary consideration, which is the effectiveness of meetings. Now, or the personal feelings of members. And I don't think these should override the first point I mentioned. That is the exercise of public power. Now, I was listening very carefully to what has been said about very effective uses in the past. But we are looking forward to the future. How can we better remind our members that in future we can avoid falling into traps? I think that is a better way to proceed. Now, because if you were to amend 83A, it is a major task. It's a major change. I agree entirely with Mr. Fan, and I'm not going to repeat it. Now, I see that Mr. Lam and Mr. Yik want to make changes, but have they really proposed concretely how to make those changes? No, they are not proposing any concrete changes. So how do we expect the Secretariat to proceed if they are not making concrete suggestions? Okay, they do not feel secure. They want to make changes, but how are they going to achieve that? They are not proposing anything concrete. Now, if they raise something, preferably with exact wordings, then we can look at how these can be achieved. Now, Mr. Fan and myself have very clear viewpoints, and then the LA can go back to see whether this can be done, rather than what we are doing now, going around in circles. Now, if you have a view, then you can make an amendment. Then this particular CMI can follow up. That would be more appropriate, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we can certainly ask them. Now, I think the exercise of public power, the monitoring of such power, must not be diminished. Now, the question we are discussing is, okay, we have members from different backgrounds, and they represent different sectors of society. So, do we want to write the legislation in such a way as to bar them from attending meetings? Or do we want them to fulfill all the requirements and then he can take part effectively? So I do not think that the public scrutiny should in any way be reduced. Using Abraham Sheck's example again. So that's how we should proceed. And the Secretary has already given us some of his views. Now, these are the general direction, but are they really feasible? That's something we can look at. Now, we're not going to make any decisions today, but after finalizing certain points, we can proceed with consultation. and we can sleep on it and think about it. Now, in the last report, what was the word used by the last term? It was not passed in the main meeting, but that's something we need to take care of. Now, I believe I have heard very clearly from members. Now, that's for 17A and B. Leaving 17C now, whether the practice of the UK House of Commons to declare relevant interest when initiating a proceeding should be examined further, with a view to applying it to the LegCo Hong Kong. Now, the Secretary has already let us know that for certain Bills Committee, maybe we'll ask the Secretary to elaborate. The practice in England, now looking at paragraph 10, the members are required to declare relevant interest when submitting a written notice initiating a proceeding, and the symbol R is printed on the order paper, and this is a separate requirement over and above the oral disclosure during the meeting. Now, paragraph 8, I beg your pardon, paragraph 11, the British practice, they have a very detailed guideline for declaration and approved by the House of Commons. If you break the practice, they have a code of practice, and if you go against that, then you will be committing an offense. Now, in the declaration of interest, the different committees have different ways of doing it. Now, in their public bill committees, members are required only to reveal interest on the first occasion, and this will be put on the web for the public to scrutinize. Now, the reason for doing this is that people already know whether the interest exists by the time they decide to join a certain committee. And this needs to be done only on the first occasion and not subsequently. So it's something we can look at when we are discussing the stamp duty amendment bill. Now, for other committees, they have to declare interest in different stages. So similar to our panel meetings, they have to declare interest on different occasions. So should we take reference from the British scenario just for the Bills Committee? Now for the panels, they have different agenda items. Now, but what about for Bills Committee? Let's say on stamp duty, that would be the main focus throughout the meetings. Now, can we examine whether this can be done in Hong Kong? Sir Kwok. Of course, we can consider this practice, and I'd like to thank the LA and the secretariat for doing the paper, but there is something very different. Now we have functional constituencies. Now Mr. Lam and Mr. Yip were speaking on behalf of their functional constituency, and they have a lot of links and relationships with their relevant FCs. So both members are from FCs, and they want to make sure they are not overstepping the line, and they talk about, say, for law firms, and there are different partners and so on. Now, under the British system, we have to be very careful. Because we have FCs, our requirements should be particularly high.
Ms. Chen Yun Han. In fact, I noted in the Bills Committee that for those in the relevant fields, they of course had a lot to say. But I think it's just right that we expect these members to declare their interests. It's true that members do register their interest when they become legitimate members, but what if there are subsequent changes to such interests? So in fact, it's really safer to make the declaration at the meeting. I think yes. Members must really try their best to remember to make the declaration. We are not saying that there is no need for the disclosure. We are just considering whether the disclosure needs only to be made initially at the first meeting of the committee, or whether there is a need to disclose the interest every time the member speaks on a matter. And Mr. Dennis Kwok has pointed out that we need to set even higher standards because we have functional constituency members. But I may not really entirely agree with him, because I think all members need to meet rising public expectations. Yes? So we need to register our interests at the beginning of the term, and then we need to make verbal disclosures at the meeting. Bills committees are different from panels. In a panel, we will be discussing 2 or 3 issues at the same meeting, but in the Bills Committee, we deal with one single issue, for example, stamp duty. So are we suggesting that a declaration or a disclosure be made at the first meeting of the Bills Committee, and then there is no need to make such disclosures at subsequent meetings? Yes. Chairman, I want to say that in the UK, they do have their special background, and they have the unique way of the operation of its parliament. So we are looking at our own system to see whether the UK model can help solve some of our problems. So we are not proceeding from the UK system to see whether we should adopt that system. We're looking at whether there are elements in the UK system that can help solve the problems that we face here. So we should first of all identify the problems in our own system, and then we can look at whether there are things in the UK system that we can draw on. Yes, thank you. So we're not going to change our system of declaration or disclosure of interest. But then is it that a disclosure needs to be made only at the first meeting of a Bills Committee? We have this discussion today because we've received a request from members of that Bills Committee to clarify the matter. And I believe members have no intention to relax the requirements on declaration and disclosure of interest. So, Chairman, can we draw the following conclusions? Concerning Rule 83A, whether it should be amended, we should first of all look at what measures can be recommended by the CMI to tackle the problems we face at the moment. I want to say something about the arrangements in New Zealand. I think 2 points are important. First, now after a written declaration has been made, and that is like the declaration under Rule 83, there is no need to repeat the declaration or disclosure. And then, if the member's interest is in common with the rest of the population of Hong Kong, with the rest of the population, again, there's no need to make a declaration, and that's similar to our Rule 84. And then Rule 83A, members may want to know its evolution. In 2002, Rule 83A came into effect, and in fact it was the amalgamation of Rule 84.2 and Rule 84.3. So perhaps members can be given the text of Rule 83A and the previous 84(2) and 84(3). So members then can consider whether in the long run Rule 83A should be amended, and then in the interim the CMI can look at possible measures to help deal with the present situation. All right, so let's ask the legal advisor to do some homework for us. Members can consult their respective political parties, and then we can have a follow-up discussion. All right? All right, so this is acceptable to members? Anything further from the Secretariat? Right, so we will further study the matter along these lines. And so it's now item 4, AOB. We don't have any AOB items. AOB? No? So, meeting adjourned.